All right, thanks, Jim. And I'm here with Jen Stacy and Alan Campbell. The biggest concern right now is storm surge, and this is kind of that worst case scenario that we feared. I just want to reiterate some of these numbers that do look very, very scary, and it is a very scary situation. These numbers here, 12 to 16 feet, this is actually forecast storm surge. The maps I was showing earlier, sort of the reasonable worst case scenario, we won't get so much into that, but somewhere in this area, we will see 12 to 16 feet of storm surge for Lee and Charlotte County. Somewhere in this area here, we are forecasting 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. That is deadly. I mean, it is. I can't stress that enough. And some people have decided to stay.
Right. Right. I think the concerns are, for those of us that have been here for multiple storms, predictions of storm surge have been put out there, and then it didn't happen. And so it gave a false level of comfort. I think what's important here is our team of meteorologists are talking about the fact that those storms were not like this. This one, unfortunately, checks all the boxes for storm surge, where the other ones did not. And what are those criteria? What is the criteria?
Okay, yeah, and there's a lot of things that we look at with storm surge. We look at the strength. So we have a storm now that has strengthened with winds at 155 miles per hour, a high-end Category 4 hurricane. So the stronger the storm is, the more water it's going to be able to push onto shore.
And real quickly, too, when we're talking 12 to 16 feet, that can move cars, that can move houses?
Yes, I mean, that can, you know, the way some of these houses are built, that can take apart houses in some situations if you get the water levels up to 12 to 16 feet. Okay, you know, picking up where we left off here with your question. So, the power of the storm, the speed that the storm is moving is also another factor. The size of the storm, just the sheer size, and we're not talking about strength now, we're just talking about the width of the storm. And this is a very large storm. This is not a Charlie. Completely different from Charlie. Charlie was a very compact storm. This is not an Irma. And I understand with Hurricane Irma, had that storm gone to the west 20 or 30 miles, just a couple of tens of miles, then we would have seen this type of storm surge over Southwest Florida. We were lucky with Irma, and so I realize that folks are thinking, "Hey, it didn't happen with Irma. It's not going to happen with this storm." Every storm is different, as you mentioned. Irma moved in Marco Island, and it went basically up like this.
So we were not on the dirty side of the storm.
We were not. We never really had the winds coming in onshore with Irma. The winds were coming in offshore. And so remember that scene for Fort Myers Beach with Irma? You saw the water go back out to the pier. So that's the first stage is what's going to happen. We've already seen that in Charlotte Harbor. The water is going to go out first, reverse storm surge, and then it's going to come back in. And then that's going to happen, unfortunately. That's going to be coinciding with the higher tide cycles.
Tell us again when the surge is coming in, because as you were talking about, it's two different events here. We're talking high winds coming in first. The surge is second, and we were just talking off camera, it's right when the high tide is hitting. I mean, Cape Coral, you're talking 6 o'clock, 6 to 8 o'clock, and that's about the time the high surge would be coming in.
Yeah, that's about the time that the storm is going to be here. And so when you have the storm here, winds are going counterclockwise around it, and so that's when you start to see the winds pushing the water on shore. So then you add on top of that the high tide, and so now you have to think about this. If you're there with your family, you look outside, determine, is the weather okay for me enough right now to get out of these areas? And in particular, we're talking about South Cape Coral. I mean, we'll just say all of Cape Coral, South Fort Myers, and we're going to look at some of those red zones here in a second. Punta Gorda, Port Charlotte, the Cape Hayes Peninsula. If you haven't left, we don't have much time. We're talking about those hurricane force winds, and Jim was showing you this, arriving, let's see, what time is it now? 8 o'clock, but mid-morning, so around 9 to 10 o'clock.
So you
don't have to go far.
Okay.
You just have to go Lehigh Acres. We'll take a look at the map. Lehigh is not under any threat for storm surge.
Okay, so like the other side of 75.
East of I-75.
Okay.
If you stay. if you make that decision and you decide to stay, so then you got to think about evacuating vertically.
Right.
Then you got to think about whatever you can do, tables, chairs, to get as high as you possibly can. And so that's kind of the situation we're in. The reason I'm holding a tape measure here, just because I wanted to drive the point home. This type of storm surge. These numbers have been going up since yesterday. So this is 3 feet. This would be 3 feet of storm surge right here. So that would come up to about my waist, okay? Let's keep going. Thank you. 7 feet of storm surge. So we're talking about, for the coast of Collier County, 7 to 11 feet of storm surge. So this is just the baseline.
Okay.
Okay, so let's keep going. There's 10 feet of storm surge.
So imagine we put that vertically, that's higher than this monitor.
That is, can we zoom out just a little bit? I'm not sure if we're as wide as we possibly can be. But the top of this big monitor, just to give you some perspective, is 10 feet. So that would be well above our head. That would cover the tops of most houses.
Right.
And keep in mind, too, that the water is moving. So you have these hurricane force
it's not
winds
a
pushing
slow
the water. So
rise.
this is not just a slow rise of water. This is a rush of water. It's a surge of water, which is why they call it storm surge. 12 feet. I'm gonna keep going here.
Yeah, I mean, I go right off camera when we get to.
This is what we're talking about
Imagine that vertical.
for the forecast storm surge. The peak surge, 16 feet, up to 16 feet of storm surge for portions of our coastline right there. If that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will.
Right, and it's going to come in fast, and again, folks, I've been there, and I went, okay, I'm not worried about the surge. Now, there are some homes, I get it, that are high enough, but you might be an island then.
Right.
But there's also a lot of homes, we're talking about the Cape Coral Yacht Club area, that flood during a normal whatever storm. Whiskey Creek, there's parts of that flood, and there's a lot of people that live there. Those homes are not high enough.
Right.
And
we
you don't want to be stranded.
We're also talking to that window, because I was just looking at my phone. I received a message from Josh, one of our viewers, asking if it's too late to leave. And as you mentioned, Jason, that window, it's very small right now.
You have to decide based on what the weather is like right now where you are. It will only continue to get worse as we go through time, and you have to decide: do I want to deal with this? Cape Coral. I mean, you can see all the red here. These are maps that a lot of times we look at internally.
Right.
Emergency managers look at these to assess risk about where they're going to issue those evacuation zones. So this is what they call a reasonable worst case scenario. But the National Hurricane Center now is forecasting peak surge at 12 to 16 feet. And the reason I'm showing this, because I just want to show you how far inland, because there's this preconception that the surge is right along the coast.
Right.
But that's not the case, because we have this. We have the Caloosahatchee River. We have Cape Coral with over 400 miles of canals. And not all of those are fed from the Gulf of Mexico. But you can see from Veterans Parkway South, red, 12 to 16 feet of storm surge. North of Veterans Parkway up through Pine Island Road, 6 to 10 feet of storm surge. In any of that would be, if this plays out as forecast and things continue on the current trend, would be unsurvivable.
Right.
In some cases. Storm surge is the number one killer, not the wind.
Yeah.
You don't have to go far. Look, east of 75.
Right.
You don't see those colors filling in.
Right. What would be the scenario in which this type of surge we wouldn't have to see? Is there any chance that this storm could wobble or change where we're not going to see this type of surge?
We are going to see, we're definitely going to see some surge.
Okay.
We would hope that it would be below those numbers that are being forecast by the National Hurricane Center. There's always a chance, but we are going to see somewhere in here, they're going to see some gauges reaching water level rises of 12 to 16 feet, based on the I mean, these are some of the most precise models that the National Hurricane Center has to estimate those water level rises. And we've talked about this scenario for years,
Sure.
worst case scenario for Southwest
Many.
Florida. But I just, I want you to know that this is not Hurricane Irma.
Right.
If Hurricane Irma had moved west 20 to 30 miles, which you can't forecast 2 days out when you have
No.
to
Right.
evacuate, right?
Right.
But this would have been a situation with Hurricane Irma. But this is not Irma. This is Hurricane Ian. This is not Charlie.
This is Ian.
Yeah, this is Ian. And so, I mean,
What about sorry, Jason,
Yeah.
folks who live, just west of 75, they're in this area right here, they're on the verge. Should they go east and go a little bit more towards Lehigh Acres just to get away? Because these numbers, they seem to be changing by, the minute, by the hour. What should they do if they live, in this area right here? Because a lot of folks, I mean, this is still, a foot of surge that they could get there, a foot of water. And they might think, I've got some sandbags, I'm okay right here. But it seems like it's continuously going out a
Yeah.
little bit more.
yeah, I mean that's a great question. I would say the areas in the reds and the oranges, that's Zone A, that's Zone B, which were the first to evacuate.
Right.
But even, I mean, you go into South Fort Myers and you look at the areas here in red around the villas, down through the forest, Island Park. Island Park,
Oh my gosh, floods all the
you
time.
remember Island Park
Yes.
back for Hurricane Irma. I mean, that's
Right.
an area prone to flooding right there around Alico Road and US 41. So again, my intention here is to not try to scare anybody, but I'm telling you, the forecast, the situation that we have been dealt with this hurricane, and now it's a high-end Category 4 hurricane. But again, this would be the second phase. This would not come until the afternoon. So the storm surge is not happening right now, but it's coming.
It's coming late this afternoon.
It's coming late this afternoon and into the evening. And I want to go up to Charlotte County here for a second, but just kind of give you an idea of all the areas here in red. And you can
Right.
see right up there, over 9 foot of storm surge possible in some of these areas. Even, places like near the Caloosahatchee, Fort Myers Shores, Buckingham, that's an area where we're going to see some spillover from some of that storm surge that's just shoved up the Caloosahatchee River from those onshore winds, because the Caloosahatchee obviously is, goes to the Gulf of Mexico.
Sure. And how long would the surge be up? I mean, how long are we dealing with that depth of water?
So normally, it depends on the storm. Normally, if the storm moves quickly through an area, then the surge lets up in, let's say 8 hours to a day. I mean, that part of it too probably doesn't matter, because I mean that's long
Once
enough
it's up, it's up, right.
Once it's up,
Right.
it's up. But then with this storm, the way it's kind of moving up to the northeast, you're going to continue to have the onshore flow. It's not going to be those hurricane force winds, but the water is going to be very, very slow to recede, because we're going to see those persistent onshore winds even throughout the day on Thursday.
Okay. The reason I asked is like,
Yeah.
Irma. So when it came up, if you were on the one side of the eye, for example, the Caloosahatchee, the water went out. I mean, you could have almost walked across it.
Yeah.
And then the water, the eye went through, backside the water came rushing back in. So, but it was pretty quick. And I think people are picturing that as well. And that is not the case with this. This is water going up and staying up for quite a while.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's all about, there's so many variables, and I
Right.
don't want to get into the weeds too
Sure,
much about
sure,
that,
sure.
but it's all about the angle that it takes closer to the coast and how long the winds are coming up, how big the storm is,
Right.
size, and then also looking at the power of the storm as well.
So a real quick question, how fast will that storm surge come on shore? I mean, will you be able to see it quickly approaching you, or will it be rapidly approaching you wherever you live in, say, that zone?
It's quick. It happens.
Yeah.
It happens quickly as the wind, especially as the tide is coming up. The winds are coming in from the west onshore. It's not a. I don't want to compare it to a tsunami in the sense, because it's not a tsunami, but it's kind of that rush, that surge of water. That is kind of similar in that it's gonna overspread many of our populated areas, based on the way things are looking right now.
And there will be debris. in
Yeah,
that.
I mean, the water's going to pick up debris.
Sure,
it's going
everything.
Right.
to pick up everything. So again, if you are there and you don't feel comfortable leaving, then you have to think about evacuating vertically. You have to get as high as you possibly can. That's the advice that I would say at this point.
That's a problem as well, because first responders, law enforcement have said right now they're not going to be able to respond to an emergency until winds are less than 45 miles per hour.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's a problem.
It looks like the storm is moving. We were feared before that it was going to slow down a little bit, maybe stall out over Southwest Florida. I'm going back here to the original graphic just so you can kind of see the overview. It looks like it will be moving faster along than we initially thought, so that's one positive aspect of it. But this is the most destructive part of a hurricane when you deal with surge. And I know it's hard because we haven't had to deal with a situation like this.
It's unprecedented
Yeah,
in our area.
it is. And we've dodged some bullets.
Yes.
And maybe got that false sense of,
I'm afraid that we have
security.
many. So that's
Yeah.
why we wanted to really,
Yeah, I know.
really hammer this home. It's very scary. And again, people say, "Oh, I have a boat." That's not a solution.
I mean, think the water is rushing. They call it surge. The water is
Right.
surging inland. But this is the forecast. This is the actual forecast from the National Hurricane Center, 12 to 16 feet of storm surge for Lee and Charlotte County. And then they've increased the storm surge over Collier County to 7 to 11 feet. I know we've talked about this for a while. I know we've stayed here for a while and talked about this, but this really has me concerned.
Right. And for good reason. We want to keep our viewers safe. That's our number one priority, is keeping families safe.
Yeah, okay. And we're, of course, going to monitor the whole storm surge situation. We have a hurricane approaching our coast. If I can just ask the producer where we want to send to next? Okay, all right, thank you. Let's go to Lisa and the